15% of American adults, over 40 million people, are looking for love online, according to Pew Research in 2016. The Daily Mail in 2014 reports that a woman's greatest fear in finding love online is that she'll meet a murderer. And in typical boorish male American fashion, a man's greatest fear is that when his date shows up, she'll be fat. While men don't seem to get it and women's greatest fears aren't often realized, there is a growing danger in online dating. It's called the romance scam. And in looking at the cautionary tale of Deborah Newell and John Meehan today, we'll look at comparisons between their story and online romance scams. And then finally, we'll find some ways in which we can avoid the online romance scam or get out of it once we're in it. So, the story of Deborah Newell and John Meehan starts like any other love story that's found online. According to People.com in 2018, it was a whirlwind romance. A candlelight dinner in 2014, October. It was so romantic. He was attentive. He seemed interested. He was charming. He was successful. A doctor. And a doctor who had worked with Doctors Without Borders in Iraq. She was completely smitten. After only a month, they moved in together. And after one more month, they were married, much to her family's horror. Agent Christine Baining of the FBI in 2017 reports that's exactly what happens with online romance scams. These predators are phishing. They're sending out multiple opportunities for targets to become victims. They're looking to rush things along so that on the other side, they don't figure out what's going on, and pretty soon they find a common interest. According to Forbes.com in 2017, that these women and men are posting online everywhere, and they find that right bait, and they've got their target. They've been hooked. In addition to that particular problem is the continued romance going on. Deborah Newell and John Meehan, things are going well, but then a nephew got a little suspicious. He did some research. And in that research, he found that John Meehan had swindled, terrorized, harassed women for over 10 years and actually went to jail for it. This caused her great concern. But what burned her the most and what made her ultimately leave the relationship was that he had lied about being a doctor. He wasn't an anesthesiologist, and he wasn't in Doctors Without Borders in Iraq. Some of the things that made her fall in love were lies. And so she got rid of him. But he was charming, and he knew how to lie. He explained away everything, and she let him. And she let him back into her life. And that's what happens with these online romance scams. Before women know it, and before men know it, they're completely sucked in. The FBI.gov in 2017 reported that in 2016, there were 15,000 cases reported of online romance scams. That's a 20% increase from the year before. And even further, each one of them averaged over $15,000 in each one taking money from the victim. That adds up to $233 million being lost in the U.S. alone for online romance scams. The end for Deborah Newell and John Meehan was a tragic one. Deborah had figured out that he was going to continue to lie, that he was going to use drugs, and she had to get him out of her life. So she planned carefully how she was going to do that with a new phone, new car, a way to get around working remotely instead of being at her job so he couldn't harass her there. For 7 months, she lived in fear. And then that fear turned to horror as he posted nude photos of her online through her own nephew's Facebook page. He then tried to sue her for half of her company and half of her money. And then he threatened the family. And so when John showed up at her daughter Tara's apartment complex in the parking lot with a knife ready to kidnap her, Tara knew that it was either kill or be killed. She actually drew inspiration, according to Harper's Bazaar in 2019, from the TV show The Walking Dead. She knew she was going to be a victim or she was going to fight, and she was going to have to kill. So as he began to stab at her, she kicked with all of her might. And while she lay on the ground, she finally kicked the knife away from him, grabbed it herself, and stabbed him 13 times. Once, finally, through the eye into the brain, which ultimately caused his death. Other victims of online romance scams don't end up in death. But for Deborah Newell and her family, they came so close. And for Deborah Newell and Tara, the recovery process has been tough. The other families, the other victims, they lose money, but mostly they lose hope in love. And many of them sit around, according to Forbes.com in 2017, waiting for what they thought was the love of their life to come back and say, oh, this is all a mistake. So the victims of the scams are still suffering. So, in order to not become a victim, we have to find some ways to avoid it. And if we become a victim, we have to find a way to get out of it. Christine Baney, from FBI 2017 explains that you want to try to avoid becoming a victim in the first place. The first step is to look for red flags. Are they moving too fast? Do they seem too interested, too eager? Or are they lying? Check for those things. In order to check for those things, you need to do some research, like a reverse image search. Is that actually who you're talking to? You might be talking to someone from another country. You might be talking to the same sex. You have no idea who you're talking to. So try to figure out if the picture that they posted online is actually them. And then finally, once you catch them in any kind of lie or moving too fast or asking for money, you need to cut off contact. That's the way you avoid becoming a victim. However, if you've become a victim, that's the first step you need to take in getting out of being a victim. Cut off contact. Block their phone number. Block their email. Do everything you can. Don't let them do this to you anymore. Don't try to fix it yourself either. Your family, they can't fix it. Report it to the authorities. The FBI actually has a special division for internet crimes. Contact them. Once you make that report, you don't just help yourself. You potentially help others that could be victims of online romance scams. And finally, don't seek revenge. If you try to seek revenge, the bad things that are going to happen, that have already happened, could become worse. Some have even tried to track them down, and their families have gotten threatened, and some we'll never see again. So today, we've looked at online romance scams and that tragic story between John Meehan and Deborah Newell, and how we can take some information from that and avoid becoming victims ourselves. Taking some solid steps to first not make ourselves a target or a victim, and then finally getting out of it if we are a victim. But I leave you with a happier note. A story of Emma Perrier and Adam Gurrell. They didn't meet the traditional old-fashioned way. In fact, Emma Perrier was a victim of catfishing. Alan Stanley had posted Adam Gurrell's picture, and once Emma found out, she was infuriated. According to the story in The Atlantic 2017, she contacted Adam and said, somebody's out there using your picture. I thought you might want to know. And he felt like he should reach out to her. So he did. And then they FaceTimed together. And then he decided he'd meet her. And in that meeting, they kissed. And they fell in love. So sometimes the story doesn't end badly. But with online romance scams, you're sure that there's a lot of them out there. And we'll want to avoid that.